been mix of tactics. Sometime, and the best phrase I know is the Maoist technique of unity and struggle. Sometimes you struggle, sometimes you move forward, sometimes you resist. Sometimes you make local alliances, sometimes you make cross-national alliances, and sometimes you involve people like Mr. Shilkan Sharma in a struggle. Transnational regional organizations become source for support. But above all, I think the book is, I'm impressed but not surprised by this book, because I have been very much almost a daily witness to in different ways to many of these struggles. But what comes across overall, it gives you the great power of ideas and power of organization. And if you have, even a small group of people have the skills and the individual commitments, they can produce individual capacities which will tap the potential for collective entrepreneurial and social energies. Thank you.
I want to thank all the panelists for such interesting comments quoting from the book. I just must compliment Shilkant for showing the lyricism of some of those women and the crafts and highlighting that. So may I have a show of hands so that I can invite you to speak? Who is going?
Because Gandhi has been mentioned by so many speakers. When Gandhiji was about to be released from the Agha Palace, the inmates there, including Sushila Nair, said, Bapu, you are going to be free soon now, so you can pursue your constructive work program wholly, devoted to entirely. So you must be very happy. He thought over and said, and this is recorded in Sushila Nair's book, that when I am free, I will concentrate on reconstruction of India's political life. And that's the main point, that many of us who feel whatever we are doing, that somehow politics pollutes, politics is dirty, we have nothing to do. That's why politics has nothing to do with you. If you have vast membership, first thing to do is their political education. There are two kinds of politics that Jayaprakash Narayan clarified. Politics of the state and politics of the people. We are not in the politics of the state. We are not seeking election to the legislatures and getting into the executive, but politics of the people. And in a mass society of over 1 billion people, this impression has remained, we have nothing to do with politics. Now, I don't know what SEWA, I know about SEWA's other work, but have they done constitutional literacy of each SEWA member? The directive principles, according to which the state is obliged to function only according to them. If it doesn't function, whose duty it is to say stop? If my wages are not paid, there is injustice in the market, I will fight about it. But if the Constitution of India is not our basis, is not our secure protection, and we see thinking of doing anything about it, we say it's in the realm of politics, then I think it requires to be rethought how much politics of the people has to be brought to life in India so that the rest of political life can improve. Thank you.
Ila, you'll have to take on that after a while. Let me have one more person. And then...
Please, no. Thank you, Devkiji. My name is Shekhar Shah. I'm a long-term admirer of Ilaben's and also I'm connected remotely through my mother who used to work with Ilaben in Ahmedabad. So it goes without saying that SEWA's entire philosophy is something that just resonates intensely. But I wanted to pick up on both Harish Khare's very insightful views, and only an insider could have proposed those questions, and then of course Lakshmiji's rendition, and asked the question, given this tremendous power of organization that Ilaben has unleashed through SEWA, and that Renana and Rima and others have carried forward, how can we move this tremendous force of self-organization, of the unleashing of entrepreneurial spirit into the realm of accountability? And it's the accountability of the state, the accountability of the market to poor people. And how can we convert that dynamic of the energy that comes through this kind of cooperative work, this kind of organization, this kind of design, new products, taking them to the market, into a greater sense of accountability of the state? Because if we don't do that, and there are various ways of doing it, there are organizations, for example, who work in primary education, who have taken to measuring what children are actually learning in schools, and then taking that information onto the national scale and actually influencing policy in a very important way. So the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, for example, is today vastly being informed by this one particular organization's work in trying to measure how children are learning or not learning in our primary schools. So in the same way, if you can take information, if you can take the images, if you can take the voices, the very people who constitute the very core of SEWA, and, as Lakshmiji said, move to the politics of the people and being able to take this tremendous energy to change the dynamics of accountability between the state and poor people. I think that's the real challenge, and I think the economic crisis throws up that challenge as well, because what we are seeing not happening in our own country is now actually writ large in terms of the global economy, where the excesses of the global economy have created problems for all of us. So that's a question I'd very much like Ila's views on.
Thank you. I will request Ila to converse on that rather than ask a question. Ila.
How do we change rules and how do we change the limits, and how do we make the government accountable to the people? According to SEWA strategy, which may be slow, but it does work, which is trying to keep balance between struggle and development, union and cooperatives in the form of organizations. And there all the time we have to balance that when to fight and then jandabaji and all that, and then when also at the same time also to make bring and put on the ground concrete alternatives and try to reach the mainstream. So that is how and both are political action. It does change the balance of power, so in favor of poor and women, and which is also it is a way to reconstruct a peaceful, non-violent society. So SEWA is slow, women are slow, but whatever goes, makes a deep a deep impression. We shout, but we shout louder with our concrete actions. So I'm not defending, but I'm just saying that this has been the nature of SEWA and the women. Actually, we go by the members' own, at their own pace and at their own demand. And invariably, since they are already working, so they are working and poor, so for them work is so central. So whatever, other issues we bring, but for them, my experience, our experience has been that for them work is so central. So we have kept work, around the work, have tried to build up the issues of social security, so which is healthcare, childcare, shelter, pension, then for them, income and asset. So that is also their main priority. So SEWA Bank, and so I think that has been like each individual has their own temperament, own character. So in my life work, I thought that we have a more uncomfortable also, but also comfortable, and by Swadharma, by Swabhav, that we go towards constructive act. And please don't think that constructive action does not raise the issues and opposition and attacks. But we do need to shout louder, and then we need to have still louder voice. Times are changing. SEWA is also now 35 years old. So the next generation, the young generation, will find a different way of shouting. Perhaps they will find their way, and try to make others uncomfortable. And how do we make the government accountable to the people? According to SEWA strategy, which may be slow, but it does work, which is trying to keep balance between struggle and development, union and cooperatives in the form of organizations. And there all the time we have to balance that when to fight and then jandabaji and all that, and then when also at the same time also to make bring and put on the ground concrete alternatives, and try to reach the mainstream. So that is how, and both are political action. It does change the balance of power, so in favor of poor and women, and which is also a way to reconstruct a peaceful, non-violent society. So SEWA is slow, women are slow, but whatever goes, makes a deep impression. We shout, but we shout louder with our concrete actions. So I'm not defending, but I'm just saying that this has been the nature of SEWA and the women. Actually, we go by the members' own, at their own pace and at their own demand. And invariably, since they are already working, so they are working in poor, so for them work is so central. So whatever, other issues we bring, but for them, my experience, our experience has been that for them work is so central. So we have kept work, around the work, have tried to build up the issues of social security, so which is healthcare, childcare, shelter, pension, then for them, income and asset. So that is also their main priority. So SEWA Bank, and so I think that has been like each each individual has their own temperament, own character. So in my life work, I thought that we have a more uncomfortable also, but also comfortable, and by Swadharma, by Swabhav, that we go towards constructive act. And please don't think that constructive action does not raise the issues, and opposition and attacks. But we do need to shout louder, and then we need to have still louder voice. Times are changing. SEWA is also now 35 years old. So the next generation, the young generation, will find a different way of shouting. Perhaps they will find their way. And try to make others uncomfortable.
Seeing one sister here and then me and yourself, I just want to add a line to that as a friend and also as somebody who is deeply involved in SEWA's story. That I feel that the knowledge that we get about the economics of the poor and also the capability and strength of the poor is itself a form of engaging in politics, in the sense that providing knowledge with a big lobby. Because I recall at the time that SEWA was coming out in the world, mobile creche was another one which was making news in Delhi, initiated by a lady who's no more, called Meera Mahadevan. And I remember writing about both SEWA and mobile creche. And when I went to Meera and said, Meera, but you should make this into a bigger program. She had one touch of that kind and it'll die. In the sense that the poor are so vulnerable, and those people living on construction sites are so vulnerable, that you politicize your organization, and if for some reason you're not on the right side of politics, it can be snuffed out. So there's also a danger of being snuffed out in the kind of political games that are taking place, which is one of the reasons why I think SEWA is constantly negotiating till you almost die with negotiating with all the obstacles to getting the poor to get their legitimate place in political economy of India. So I sort of feel the same nervousness if one enters politics just because one is a big organization. So thanks Harish for raising this very good question and getting so many people curious about it. May I request your question?
My name is Tarpa Chotran, and I'm from California, and I travel around India, and I try to figure out what's going on. I read the newspapers, and in terms of SEWA and women's organizations similar to that, I always wonder what's going on with the men. Is anybody doing anything to raise the level of awareness, education, health awareness of the men? I see books on the bookstores on women's health issues in the villages, but I've never seen a book on men's health issues in the villages. So what's going on with the other part? I mean, these women who you are working with, they have a husband, they have sons, they have nephews, they have fathers, they have grandfathers, and so on. Well, what's going on with them? That's, somebody may know.
I want to start by thanking Len for personally documenting the stories that all of us have watched from the 70s. And with the powerful, she might say she finds it hard to write, but there are few people who write more effectively than Ila Ben does. There's every bit of punch in that writing, as there is punch in everything that Ila Ben has ever done. And I also want to reminisce for a minute, because early 70s, when we first came to Ahmedabad, and also I personally knew Ramesh Bhai, because in fact, in many ways, I met Ila Ben more through Ramesh Bhai than directly through the women's movement. I used to write a consumer column and be leading consumer activist in Ahmedabad at that time. And in fact, I remember the first time I was in Ila Ben's home, I was really dialoguing with him, and Ila Ben said, do you mind if I have a meeting I need to address at such and such street corner, and you're talking with Ramesh, so may I just go away? And I said, do you mind if I come along? Because I also want to know about your work. And in fact, the first piece I wrote on Ila Ben, and I'm talking in the mid-70s, was then. And I wrote a piece saying that watching Ila Ben in action in that street corner with the women around her, I know this is an organization that's going to succeed, because there's not just one Ila Bhatt, but there are 100 out there. And interestingly also, Ila Ben's response to that, I still treasure a postcard that lies somewhere in my cupboard, which said, Rami Ben, thank you very much for putting your pulse on what is happening. Yes, there are hundreds of women there that are with me as comrades. And I think it's this self-effacing kind of perception that she had right from the start that is the strength with which all these stories that have come out. And thank you for putting your own personal pen to it to bring it out. I also want to confess another failure. I remember at the time when Martha Stewart came out and wanted to get SEWA video going. And Martha was also a dear friend of mine, and she asked my advice. And I said, much as I admire Ila Ben and the organization, video and SEWA, there's the National Institute of Design, there are many other organizations. I can't quite link video. And I fell flat on my face as a communicator. Realize what she had been realizing all along, although we claimed to be the communicators and she was not, that the women had a much better eye and ear for what was their own problem to document it than anybody else could. But I want to now come back to echo the question that everybody else has been asking in this room here. And I want to preface asking that question again with just harking back to yet another story, not from SEWA, but the Nellore, the famous anti-Arak rather, movement that came about. And to say that, what were the enormous sacrifices that were made as women fought the liquor lobby with red chilies, and many of them died. Several of them did die in the hunger strikes that took place thereafter, the loss of livelihood, what it meant in their lives. We all documented that and gave them kudos. Change of government. I mean, they came in with a wave of euphoria. There was prohibition, there was all kinds of things happened. But a change of government, change of policy completely.